Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it doesn't explode, it whispers, quiet, cold, and surgical. And in Caitlin Clark's case, revenge came disguised as a single word. No. No to Geno Auriemma. No to a legacy that once rejected her. No to $1 million offer that crawled back years later, begging for her brilliance. People asked, who walks away from over $1 million for 8 weeks of basketball? But Clark wasn't turning down money. She was turning down a man who dismissed her, belittled her, and treated her like nothing. One word humbled him more than any loss ever could. For decades, Geno Auriemma ruled women's basketball with an iron grip. He was the gatekeeper, the kingmaker, the man who decided which players mattered and which faded into footnotes. But Clark flipped that script. She didn't need his blessing or his dynasty. She built her empire from scratch. And when he finally came back, contract in hand, begging for the same talent he once ignored, she answered with the calmest, deadliest rejection imaginable. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was power. The kind of power only earned through dominance, resilience, and years of being underestimated by the man now kneeling before her, before the fame, before the sold-out arenas and shattered viewing records. Caitlin Clark was just a kid dreaming of UConn, the dynasty, the empire, the mountain every young hooper stared at like it was Olympus. She openly admitted it. UConn was the coolest place imaginable. And for a girl from Iowa, being recruited by Geno felt like destiny. But destiny never called. Not once. Geno never picked up the phone, never reached out to her parents, barely sent a whisper through her AAU coach. For the greatest recruiter the sport had ever known, that silence was louder than any insult. Geno later claimed he already had Paige Buchers and didn't want 2-point guards. On paper, it made sense, but then came the slap in the face. He suggested Clark should have called him. Think about that arrogance. The legendary recruiter who built a kingdom by spotting generational talent early suddenly declared Caitlin Clark wasn't worth dialing. That wasn't oversight. That wasn't strategy. That was pure disrespect. And Clark felt it. The sting of that dismissal didn't fade. She filed it away silently, promising herself she'd go somewhere she was valued, not somewhere she'd be treated like an afterthought. So Caitlin Clark chose Iowa, a program without UConn's banners, mystique, or dynasty glow. To many, it looked like a consolation prize. But to Clark, it was liberation. At Iowa, she wasn't a shadow. She wasn't the backup plan. She was the centerpiece, the chosen one. From the moment she stepped onto that court in Iowa City, she rewrote the rules. Her logo threes weren't just buckets. They were messages. Her sold-out arenas weren't accidents. They were proof. Every record she obliterated whispered the same truth into Geno's ears. You missed this, and you'll spend the rest of your career regretting it. While Clark ascended, Geno doubled down on arrogance. Instead of acknowledging her as a generational force, he minimized her brilliance with condescending sound bites. He called her a kid playing like she was in the driveway, ignoring the fact that this kid was dragging women's basketball to heights it had never seen. Ordinary players don't sell out Madison Square Garden. Ordinary players don't elevate the entire WNBA into mainstream relevance. But to Geno, shrinking her success wasn't analysis. It was survival. He wasn't critiquing her game. He was clinging to his fading relevance as her star grew brighter. Geno's insecurity only sharpened over time. Every Clark highlight, every shattered record, every viral moment chipped away at the dynasty he built. So he did what insecure legends often do. He talked, constantly. And every time her name surfaced, he tethered her to Paige Buchers. If Clark was fearless, Paige was too. If Clark was captivating fans, Paige had done it first. It wasn't coincidence. It was strategy. By attaching Clark to his star players, he kept the spotlight orbiting around himself. But the world noticed. Analysts noticed. Coaches noticed. Fans noticed. His mask of humility began to slip. Eventually, Geno went from subtle digs to outright insults. And he didn't just target Clark. He targeted the fans who supported her revolution. On the Dan Patrick Show in June 2024, he crossed a line he could never erase. He labeled Clark supporters delusional. He claimed they didn't understand the game. He said their belief in her MVP potential as a rookie was damaging women's basketball. Think about how unhinged that is. Millions of new fans were pouring into sport, buying tickets, watching broadcasts, wearing jerseys, and instead of thanking them, Geno spit in their faces. But here's where karma turned cinematic. Everything Geno mocked became reality. Clark didn't clap back. She didn't tweet. She didn't entertain the noise. Her comeback happened exactly where it mattered. On the court, she won Rookie of the Year. She made all WNBA first team. And when the MVP votes dropped, she finished exactly fourth, just like her delusional fans predicted. Geno's spite aged like spoiled milk. The fans weren't clueless. They were prophetic, and Clark proved it with every no-look pass, every long-range bomb, and every arena that shook the moment she stepped onto the hardwood. Her silence was louder than his interviews. Night after night, Clark delivered performances that turned his insults into punchlines. She didn't need to say his name. Her dominance said everything. Every record she broke mocked the people who doubted her. Every accolade she earned exposed the insecurity behind Geno's words. Every roaring crowd reminded the world that she wasn't just living up to the hype, she was surpassing it. And Geno, the self-appointed gatekeeper of women's basketball wisdom, was left watching helplessly as the sport's new era unfolded without him controlling the narrative. His throne was crumbling. Geno Auriemma couldn't stomach being wrong. And it wasn't just about Clark's game. It was about what she represented, a shift in power, an undeniable changing of the guard. Women's basketball no longer revolved around him, and he hated it. So he kept talking. Interview after interview, podcast after podcast. Clark's name rolled off his tongue like a reflex. One compliment wrapped in two insults. A little praise with a big disclaimer. But the more he talked, the more obvious it became. Caitlin Clark wasn't thinking about him at all. Yet somehow, she lived rent-free in his mind. At some point, words weren't enough. So Geno pivoted to something even more desperate. If he couldn't control the narrative with commentary, maybe he could control it with money. And that's how the $1 million offer resurfaced years after he ignored her. This time, he wasn't the all-powerful recruiter dictating terms. He was the one chasing her. The man who once didn't think she was worth a phone call suddenly dangled 7 figures for 8 weeks of basketball. But the offer wasn't an opportunity. It was a confession, a silent admission that he underestimated the greatest player of her generation. To outsiders, turning down over $1 million seemed insane. But Clark understood what the offer really meant. This wasn't about money. It was about leverage, about respect, about correcting the arrogance of a man who thought she would always need him. Saying yes would have rewritten history in his favor, redeeming him as a visionary who always knew her worth. But Clark didn't owe him that redemption. She owed him nothing, not after years of doubt, dismissal, and disrespect. So she delivered the most devastating revenge ever. She said no, calmly, quietly, powerfully. Her refusal wasn't emotional. It wasn't vindictive. It was intentional. Clark didn't scream, didn't mock, didn't grandstand. She simply understood her value, and that understanding was something Geno never gave her. By rejecting the offer, she shattered the illusion that he still held influence over the sport's brightest star. It was the most poetic reversal possible. The man who built a dynasty on choosing the right players failed to choose the one who would redefine women's basketball. And when he tried to reclaim that mistake through money, she denied him the closure he was desperate to buy. And that's the heart of this story. Caitlin Clark didn't chase revenge. She didn't plot to embarrass Geno. She was simply being herself. Focused, gifted, relentless. Her success exposed him naturally. Her rise humbled him effortlessly. Her trajectory proved his judgment flawed without her ever calling him out. In the end, she didn't defeat Geno. He defeated himself, his arrogance, his insecurity, his inability to see the future standing right in front of him. And with one quiet, devastating word, no, Clark closed a chapter he tried so hard to rewrite, leaving him to live with the legacy of his mistake. By the end of her rookie year, the narrative wasn't whether Clark lived up to the hype. It was how completely she obliterated every doubt thrown her way. Geno's insults didn't just age poorly. They became some of the worst takes in sports history. Bitter, insecure, detached from reality. Every night Clark proved him wrong. It chipped away at the myth of his infallibility. And the irony? Clark wasn't even thinking about him. She was too busy elevating the game, captivating audiences, and breaking barriers. But every milestone she reached cast another shadow of a man who failed to believe in her. Geno struggled to accept the new era became painfully obvious. Instead of embracing the shift, he resisted it. Instead of celebrating the sport's growth, he treated it like a threat. His interviews grew more defensive, his comments more contradictory. One moment praising Clark's impact, the next diminishing her achievements. The inconsistency wasn't analytical, it was emotional. It revealed a man grappling with the loss of control, trying desperately to maintain his place at the center of a sport that had outgrown him. Meanwhile, Clark kept soaring, untouched by the insecurities swirling beneath Geno's polished exterior. Fans noticed the contrast. Where Geno offered resistance, Clark offered revolution. Where he clung to the past, she built the future. Thousands of new fans entered the sport because of her. Families, kids, casuals, newcomers who never watched a game before. They didn't care about old politics or coaching dynasties. They cared about the excitement she brought, the joy, the electricity. Clark wasn't just a player. She was an event, and with every new supporter, Geno's grip on the sport loosened. The spotlight was shifting, and no amount of commentary could stop the momentum she created. But the final blow wasn't a record, a highlight, or an accolade. It was a cold, undeniable truth that Geno no longer controlled the narrative. Clark's success validated the very fans he insulted. Her rookie year became a cinematic takedown of his arrogance. Everything he said she couldn't do, she did. Everything he mocked, she achieved. His words crumbled beneath the weight of her accomplishments. It wasn't just a loss. It was exposure. Exposure of ego. Exposure of insecurity. Exposure of a man who misunderstood the moment, the movement, and the generational star redefining the sport. And through all of it, Clark stayed silent. No interviews calling him out. No social media jabs. No victorious speeches. Her silence was elegance. Her silence was dominance. Her silence was a final chapter in a story he unintentionally wrote. She didn't need to beat Geno. She didn't need to humiliate him. She simply needed to be herself, a once-in-a-generation force who carried women's basketball into its greatest era. And in doing so, she left Geno Auriemma standing alone with nothing but regret, watching the player he once ignored become the superstar he could never claim. Here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. Caitlin Clark didn't just change the sport. She changed the power structure. She proved that players, not coaches, not gatekeepers, not dynasties, drive the future. Geno Auriemma spent years believing women's basketball revolved around him, but Clark shattered that illusion. Her rise didn't need his approval. Her success didn't require his system. Her legacy didn't depend on his praise. She built everything without him. And when he finally reached back into her story, contract in hand, tried to rewrite the past, she met him with the one answer he never expected. No, the most powerful word in sports history. No to the offer. No to the revisionist history. No to the idea that he still controlled her destiny. That rejection wasn't petty, it was poetic. It was the moment the balance of power officially shifted. Coaches used to define the stars. Now, the stars redefine the coaches. Clark didn't just walk away from $1 million. She walked away from a man who underestimated her, dismissed her, and later attempted to benefit from the legacy she forged. And in doing so, she showed the world exactly who held the real leverage. The beauty of the story is how unintentionally perfect it is. Clark didn't orchestrate revenge. She didn't plot to dismantle Geno's ego. She didn't even waste time thinking about him. Her career naturally exposed his flaws, his bias, his insecurity, his inability to recognize brilliance when it wasn't packaged exactly how he wanted. The recruitment miss, the backhanded comments, the fan insults, the desperate last-minute offer, they all point to one truth. Geno Auriemma didn't lose Caitlin Clark. He never deserved her. And by the time he realized what he missed, it was too late. Clark's dominance reshaped women's basketball. She brought in millions of new fans, mainstream attention, sold out arenas, and record-breaking numbers. She didn't just elevate the sport, she redefined its ceiling. And all the while, she did it without chasing validation from the old guard. The people who doubted her became footnotes. The people who supported her became part of history. And the man who once thought she wasn't worth a phone call became a cautionary tale you'll hear for decades. The world moved forward with Caitlin Clark leading the charge, and Geno was left staring at the future he failed to embrace. In the end, this isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about evolution. It's about what happens when a sport outgrows its gatekeepers. Caitlin Clark didn't tear down Geno Auriemma. She simply outshined him. She didn't destroy his legacy. She just built a bigger one. She didn't embarrass him. She exposed him. And all it took was being undeniably great. The $1 million offer was never about money. It was about power. And Clark's refusal proved exactly who holds it now. The future belongs to her. The spotlight belongs to her. The game belongs to her. And no one, especially Geno, can change that.